Talenti on the beat, boy.
As you can see, the weather is finally getting better. It's been like 2 weeks of just clouds and gray and rain. I hate it. I'm so happy there's a little bit of sun. I can see the colors, it's really nice. Either way though, good weather or not, just like all music producers, I'm gonna celebrate the pretty day by locking myself in the studio in the dark all day, making beats, making videos. You know how it is. All right, let's get into the studio. This is a bit of a different video. You guys have been asking me for an uncut mix tutorial where I just take a beat, mix it from beginning to end, not really doing any cuts, not really like showing just parts of it, but just showing the entire process. So this is what we're doing today. I actually just finished shooting a video where I made the beat, and I'm actually gonna release that video in a couple of days. So you're seeing this right now, but I actually already made the video, and then that one is gonna be out in 2 days. It's really confusing. It doesn't really matter. Right now we're gonna take the beat, it's completely unmixed, everything is clipping, everything is at zero, no effects, nothing at all, and we're gonna build it up from scratch. We're gonna mix it, and we're gonna get it sounding good. This is definitely gonna be a little bit of a longer video, but I really suggest, if you're a producer and you wanna get better at mixing, I really suggest watching it all the way through, beginning to end. And probably I also suggest like either saving it somewhere or putting it in a playlist or whatever, just so you can reference it back whenever you need help mixing. So you can just come back to this video, watch it again, watch the parts that you need, and kind of help with the process of mixing your beats. A little quick disclaimer before we get into the mixing. This is my own process. Not everybody has the same process. There's no only way or best way or unique way to go about mixing your beats. This is kind of like making music. Everybody's got their own taste, everybody's got their own style, and everybody's got their own process. All right, I felt like it was important to say that. Enough talking, let's get into the video. All right, let's get into it. So the first thing I do before I start mixing is I organize my tracks. I already did that right here, but I simply just put them in the order that I'm gonna mix them in, which is usually drums, hi-hats, 808s, any extra percussions that I may have. In this case, I have none. And then all my melody stuff, and then the tag at the end. And if I have some like extra effects, they go under the tag. Keep in mind the beat is not really arranged yet, so there might be some extra elements that I would add at the very end, like some extra symbols and little things. But for the most part, this is the whole beat. It's got all the main parts, so it's ready to be mixed. I usually mix using just a loop of the chorus section with like all the elements, like when they're all playing at the same time. So I'm just gonna loop these 4 bars right here, and we're gonna get started with drums. All right, so the first thing we want to do is gain staging. So I'm going to open up Span, which is a great plugin to measure the level. I talk about this plugin in like all my videos. I'm going to press play, and I'm going to start pulling down my gain knob. This is just a gain plugin in Ableton. It's called Utility. If you use FL or something else, just look for a gain plugin. There's always one included in your DAW. And we're going to pull down the gain knob literally until we hit -12 dB. That's where I set my drums usually. Right about there is good. The next thing I'm gonna do is gonna be compression. So you can kind of use any compressor you want. For drums, I tend to use H-Comp by Waves. I just really like the way that sounds, and it's got some nice presets. I usually use the Drum Spy or Drums Kid. So let's try Kid. Perfect. Just like with everything else, every time we add a plugin, we wanna open up Span and make sure that our level is still on -12. It's still under control. Right about there is fine. All right, so that's all I'm gonna do for these main drums. Let's do hi-hats. And the first thing we're gonna wanna do is set the levels against the main drums. Right about there for now. I'm also gonna turn on this EQ, and I'm gonna cut the low end from the hi-hat because we don't need that. All right, so the next thing that I like to do is take all my drum tracks. In this case, there's only 2 drums and hi-hats, but if there were any percussion tracks or anything like that, I would also put them in the same category. I take my drum tracks and I group them. If you're in Ableton, you just select them and you do Alt-G, and that puts them into a group. If you're on a different DAW, just look up the shortcut to like group tracks. Everybody has it, they're all in there, so just go look it up. So now that I have the group, I'm gonna go and get span just to see where my level is at on the group. It's pretty good, it's fine for now. I usually like to add a second compressor on the group just so it kind of like squishes all my drums with all the percussions, everything, all the elements, the hi-hats, and it kind of just like compresses the whole thing. For this phase, I like to use this other wave compressor called DPR 402. Again, you can kind of use any compressor you want. I tend to use the same ones just because I know they sound good and I'm just used to the way they look. But you can kind of use whatever you want. I like this preset in this one called Drum Group. And I just pull down the noise knob right here because it just adds like analog noise, and I don't really want that. And then I'm just gonna mess with the output knob to make sure that the level is still at -12 where I want it to be. That's fine. The next and probably last thing that I'm gonna do to my drums right now is get an EQ. I like the FabFilter Pro Q2, but again, you can use any EQ you want. And what I'm gonna do in this one, I'm gonna cut the low frequencies below 20 Hertz, just because those are frequencies that we don't really hear, and they just take up space in the mix, and they just kind of make everything sound muddier. So let's start by doing that. I'm gonna actually select the low cut. I'm gonna make it as steep as possible. I'm gonna put 20 Hertz and right about there. So like really kind of like a hard cut at 20 Hertz. I also like to do the same thing on the top end. I usually put it at 22.5 or 23,000 Hertz. In this case, I'm gonna do 22.5, and I'm gonna do the same kind of like hard cut. Cool, now it doesn't always need it, but I'm gonna do it for the purpose of the video. Sometimes I like to highlight the frequency of my kick drum, like the little hit at the beginning, just to make it punch a little extra hard. It's usually around like 150 depending on the sample that you picked. So let's try to find it, and just a little tiny bump. I'm gonna do the same thing but on my claps. So I just really want to have kick and claps kind of like cutting through, and everything else kind of in the background. Right about there is good. Cool, I'm happy with the drums for now. Let's move on to the second thing that I'm gonna mix, which is 808s. So the first thing I wanna do is check my levels, aka gain staging. So I'm gonna open up span again on the 808. I'm gonna have my utility knob right here, like the gain plugin, and I'm gonna start pulling down the gain until it hits -18. So for my drums, I do -12. For basically everything else, I do -18. Right about there. I also like to put my 808s in mono, so I'm going to turn that on and make it mono. Now if you picked a good sample, and this is my own sample, so it's a good sample. If you picked a good sample, you don't really have to do that much, but you might want to distort it depending on the situation and the sample that you picked. You might want to do some other things. One thing that I always do is put a limiter on it. I just feel like it makes it hit just a little bit harder. So I like to put a limiter right before my span, and I set it at -18. So right at -18 is going to squish everything down. And you want to set it so that it's working, like you can see that it's squishing it, but not a lot. You don't want it to work too much, because otherwise it's going to kind of like kill the punch. You just want it to work a little bit. Kind of like that. So let's see how it's sounding with the drums. The 808 right now is a little bit too loud, so I'm just gonna pull down the fader right here. I like to set my level starting from like lower, where it's like way too low, like maybe -10, and then just work my way up 1 dB at a time until I hit that spot where like I can still feel the hard punch of the kick drum, but I can also really feel the 808, and just kind of find that perfect balance. Once again, this is kind of like personal preference, but to me that sounds pretty good right now. Now I don't always do it. In fact, for this kind of beat, I wouldn't necessarily be doing this, but I'm gonna just show it to you because it's a cool trick to have. I like to pull an EQ and put it on my 808. So I'm going to get the same Pro Q2. The one thing that I'm going to go ahead and do though is find that same frequency that I highlighted on my kick drum and kind of empty it out on the 808. So the kick drum hits harder on that frequency and the 808 is actually a little bit quieter. This way they're not going to like step over each other. So let me go check on my drums. It was 131. So I'm actually going to be precise with it. I'm going to put 131. And I'm just going to do like a little dip, just to free up that space for the kick drum. Hey! Right now this is perfect, but if it's not hitting hard enough, just put a distortion on it and just kind of like crank it up like pretty loud. And make sure you turn down the gain again, so you don't want to like raise your level, you just want to change the quality of the sound. Just distort it a little bit, that's going to highlight some of the higher frequencies and it's going to sound like louder and crispier, especially through like smaller speakers. But for this beat and for the way this is set up, this is fine right now, it sounds great. Cool, let's work on the melody. So I'm gonna mute everything else, I'm gonna just solo the melody, and let's see where we're at first of all. Okay, that's loud. So the first thing we wanna do is get a span and see where the level is at, and also a utility plugin like the gain plugin, and we wanna do the same thing we did for the other ones and bring it down to -18. Right about there is good. The next thing I'm going to do is pull up an EQ. I'm still going to use the same Pro Q2 just because I really like it. I'm going to start by cutting the low end, and I'm actually going to cut a lot of it because I want that low end space to be freed up for 808 and kick and pretty much nothing else. So I'm actually going to also solo the 808 with the melody, so I can kind of like play them against each other and I can see which spot sounds the best. I like it right about there. Also on this melody, because there's a little bit of noise in the sound that I picked, I'm going to cut some of the high end. Not too much, just a little bit, like way up, like I did with the hi-hats, with the drums. Right about there. Now the melody is still way too loud and I already have it grouped, so I'm just going to turn down the volume on the group itself. I'm gonna turn down the volume of that like pluck thing because it's way too loud compared to the flute, and I really kind of want the flute to shine in this type of melody. One quick thing I want to point out is that I pen these two elements a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right. This way I kind of free up that space in the center for kick and 808, and everything else kind of moves around it. This way the beat is going to sound louder, it's going to sound like spacier, it's just going to have a much better space, and it's going to hit a lot harder. I'm actually going to adjust the EQ a little bit on that melody because I just want the higher frequencies to kind of like come out a little bit harder. Alright, it's starting to sound really good. We're getting close to the end. Stay with me here. Okay, so right now we're going to focus on the master track, the one at the end where all your instruments are going into and then going out into your speakers or into your whatever you're listening from. A common misconception that a lot of people have is that the master track serves the purpose of mastering your beat. Those are two completely different things. So right now we're just doing the mixing process. Then what we're going to do is going to be exporting this into a WAV file that then we're going to master as a single WAV file. So we don't want to do mastering and mixing in the same session. That is generally a really big mistake that people do. So anyway, so the first thing we're going to do is going to be checking our level on spend. We want to make sure that our mixes don't really go much louder than -6 dB. -6 dB is where we want to then export them, bring them into a new session, master them, bring them to 0, and make them nice and loud and punchy. One mistake that I made for the longest time was relying too much on mastering. Like my mix was sounding a little bit weak, but I was like, yeah, it's just because it's not mastered. It's going to be fine. It's not. Your mixes should sound pretty much like done. And all mastering is going to do is really kind of like make it louder and maybe make it a little bit wider, but that's about it. Your mix should be sounding like good to go. Just a little quiet, but it should be sounding perfect. Anyway, so let's press play and see where we're at with the level. Alright, that's actually pretty spot on, right about -6, so perfect. One thing that I want to do that I always do on my master track is put an EQ on it and once again do a pass cutting the low end, so around 20 Hertz, and cutting the high end one more time. Again, I don't know why, and you know, it just makes it sound harder. I can't exactly tell you why, but it makes everything sound harder. And I like the way it sounds, so I'm going to do it. Right about there. This is without. This is with. It's harder, right? It feels harder. I don't know. I don't always do this, but for the purpose of this video, I'm going to show this to you because it's a plugin that I really like and sometimes I use it on my mixes when they need a little bit of help. It's called Neutron True. It's by iZotope, the same company that makes Ozone. And we're just going to open it up and they have some really cool presets for mixing actually if you're going to mix bus. And sometimes I just like to try some of these out and see if they make it sound better or worse. And sometimes they really help, kind of like clean up your mix. Like that was nice. Like this one's really nice right now. Basic mix bus, this could be the one. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with this gentle and clear preset. As you can see, it doesn't really do like all that much, but it puts an EQ on it in this case and just kind of boosts some frequencies, cuts some of the bass, just kind of cleans it up a little bit. And it also put a compressor on the whole thing, which, let's see if it's even working. Yeah. Yeah, it's just kind of compressing the whole thing, which is pretty nice. So an alternative to using this, if you don't have it or anything like that, you can basically just EQ and compress on your master. Just put some compression to kind of squish everything down and put an EQ to kind of like highlight the frequencies that are kind of weak and cut the low end, cut the high end, and you'll be good. So let's see where we're at with the level right now. Still around -6, so we are good. And that's how I mix my beats. So in a couple of days, I'm going to release the cook-up video of how I made this beat from scratch, so you guys can see that too, probably on Thursday, in like a couple of days. If you haven't done that yet, please hit the subscribe button and notification bell. By the time you see this video, we might be over 20K, maybe not, it doesn't matter. Thank you guys so much. Also, if you have a question you want to ask privately, you want to say hi, whatever it is, Instagram is the best place to do it. Just shoot me a DM, and as soon as I can, I'll respond to you. Did I just say DN? DM. Alright, I guess this is it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching the video all the way through. This was a long one. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, be positive, and positive things will happen.